I watched The Reef today, so that means that you now have to hear about it. Directed by Andrew Traucki, The Reef is a 2010 Australian survival film which itself is loosely based on a true story, that of Australian man Ray Boundy, who was the sole survivor of a tiger shark attack in 1983 that took the lives of his two friends, Dennis Murphy and Linda Ann Horton, when the trawler they were operating sank in rough seas. Now, The Reef differs considerably from the true events it's based on. There are 5 people present here instead of the 3 who actually went through these events. They are on a yacht which they're delivering to a customer in Indonesia rather than a fishing trawler, and it isn't a tiger shark that they end up encountering, but a different kind of shark that we'll come to later. The story begins with our main characters all meeting up at the airport, which includes main character Luke, the yacht delivery man, his friend Matt and his girlfriend Susie, who is invited along for the journey, Matt's sister Kate, who Luke has some history with, and fellow sailor Warren, who also comes along to act as a second hand. In order to reach Indonesia, they must sail through a coral reef, which can be a rather treacherous thing to do. Now, I have to say that The Reef didn't really grab me within the first 15 minutes or so. The main reason for this is that the start of the film begins with a lot of relationship talk and wishy-washy lovey-dovey dialogue. With a heavy dosage of flatly delivered "it's complicated babe" style exchanges in Australian accents, I felt like I was watching an episode of Neighbours and not a thrilling shark movie. This sort of thing, for me personally, is very boring and very tedious. Characters in movies having mundane romantic issues simply isn't enough to make me care about them. What makes me care about them is seeing them come up with ways to overcome extreme situations and defy the odds, or at least make a serious effort at doing so, and as a consequence, I felt like this film had something of a weak opening. However, in the interest of reviewing this film for the channel, I stuck with it in the hope that it would improve, and luckily for me, it actually did get a lot better as it went on. After meeting up at the airport and catching up with one another, they head to the docks where Luke will be collecting the yacht that needs to be delivered to Indonesia. The man in the front office shows us some of the preserved shark jaws he keeps on the wall as trophies. He's clearly tangled with a few, but I have to say, if he's just going out to sea in order to hunt and kill sharks just to have their jaws on display in his office, then I'd say he's a massive dick. He lists off all the different types of sharks that are up on the wall, pointing out the mako, the tiger, and the white pointer, which is actually another name for a great white. Will it be one of these species that the gang encounter later on? You'll just have to wait and see. Our cast of characters then get onto the yacht and out to the open sea. At some point slightly later on, they decide to drop anchor for a while and take a small inflatable boat across the reef to a small island for a break, while Warren stays on the yacht and does a spot of fishing. They also decide that it would be a good idea to go for a swim in the waters off the coast of Australia. People never cease to amaze me. Anyway, it's here in the ocean where we get our first jump scare, and it actually did make me jump. Kate is watching the fish swimming amongst the reef, and also she observes a black-tip reef shark and sees that all of the fish are beginning to flee. As the tension is ramped up rather skillfully by the director as the minimalistic style of ominous music starts to swell, I found myself thinking that this was probably going to be the first kill of the movie, but it's then that Luke appears behind her suddenly, and as I said, this one did get me. I know many of you will have a rather low opinion of jump scares, and this is an opinion I hold too, if the film in question relies solely on them and doesn't even try to deliver any genuine horror, but The Reef doesn't do that. In fact, this film only has a total of 2 jump scares. That was the first jump scare, and the second one is, honestly, extremely lame. The rest of it is a slow build-up of anxiety-inducing tension, which is, for the most part, very well executed. On the way back to the yacht, their inflatable motorboat hits the reef below or is possibly bitten by something, causing it to begin deflating. They make it back to the yacht, but the inflatable is no longer usable. This is a nice bit of foreshadowing of what is shortly to come. On the second day of their journey, the yacht, like the motorboat before it, also hits the reef below. Apparently. I say apparently, as strangely, we don't really see any of this take place. One second the yacht is cruising along nicely, and the next second everything is upside down, it's pitch black, and they're all underwater. The yacht has capsized in an instant, and now they're all scrambling to get back onto its now exposed underside. I'm guessing they didn't have the budget for an actual sinking scene, or maybe they did and it was cut for time. Anyway, I suppose it doesn't really matter as it's obvious what's happened, and I have enough imagination to fill in the blanks. The only reason I bring it up is because the pacing was very off in this sequence, all of this having taken place in a split second, literally. Oh well, 4 of the 5 decide to try and swim to dry land. However, Warren doesn't feel up to it and decides to stay on the capsized yacht, where he sits and watches various sharks gathering around him and splashing about with excitement. And that's the last we see of Warren. The others all try and make their way toward Turtle Island, which Luke estimates is around 10 or 12 miles away. The tide was taking the sinking yacht further out to sea, and so this was their only option, crazy as it might seem. But to be honest, if my only 2 options were to either A, swim across the Indian Ocean and probably get eaten by a shark, or B, stay on a sinking boat and definitely get eaten by a shark, then I'd like to think I would choose the former, as there is at least a chance of survival, even if it is absolutely minute. As the 4 make their way across the tropical sea, they start to notice movement around them that isn't the result of their own swimming or splashing, or the waves. Now I suppose it's obvious by this point that the 4 of them are going to be picked off one by one. This is after all a shark film, and the characters are swimming around in a tropical ocean in the southern hemisphere with no land around for miles. And it is now that we start getting some serious shark action, and the species encountered by Luke, Kate, Matt and Susie is, of course, the big daddy of the shark world, the great white. This is a key area where the story differs from the true events it is based on, as in real life, Ray Boundy and his friends were attacked by a tiger shark, not a great white. As time goes on, they begin to understand that it is the same great white that is trailing them and taking them out one by one. The shark in the reef is portrayed by using real recorded footage of a great white, which is then superimposed into the film, making it appear as though it is actually swimming alongside our terrified group of unfortunate characters. It seems that there are in fact 3 distinct categories of shark film. There are the ones that use practical effects and models like Jaws, the ones that depict their sharks using CGI for the most part like Deep Blue Sea, and then there are those that utilise archive footage and real-life recordings of these animals in the wild and edit it into the film wherever it's needed. And the reef falls into this last category. There are of course pros and cons to this method of filmmaking. One advantage of using real footage is that it's, well, real, and it really heightens the atmosphere and tension when done well, because you are looking at something that is clearly the real deal and not obvious CGI or a puppet of some kind. However, the downside of this method is the limited amount of interaction the shark is able to have with the actors in the film. You can't really show them being munched up by the shark, if you wanted to include that, and it takes some clever editing to convince you that the character and the shark are really within a few feet of each other. The reef, luckily, manages to pull this off for the most part, with some clever positioning and framing of the shark footage and the actors. So what did I think of The Reef as a film? I quite enjoyed it. It certainly was a well-made film, and this is one of the better received of all the shark films to come out over the years. In a sea of schlocky rubbish, where you have cheaply made stuff like Sharknado and Mega Shark vs Giant Octopus, The Reef stands out amongst them as a serious film, one that tries to tell a genuine story of survival against insane odds, akin to films like The Shallows and Open Water. The plot itself wasn't terribly cerebral, being a straightforward, let's get from point A to point B affair, but this is really all you need for this type of movie. It's set in the middle of the ocean, and so it's not like there's a bevy of locations to visit or set pieces to display, but the simplicity, constant movement, and dangerous nature of the open ocean more than make up for this. The acting was, I would say, serviceable. None of them really stood out as being amazing in my view, but none of them were particularly bad either. It could be said that in the high-intensity scenes, where the actors were required to portray their characters in a state of fear or panic, they performed well, but the beginning scenes where all was calm were rather dull. While I don't have anything against any of the actors who played a part in this film, I have to say that I didn't find any of them particularly charismatic or memorable. Again, that's not to say that they did a bad job at all. They did all that was required of them, but there just wasn't anything that particularly stood out to me or made me want to check out any of their other work on the strength of their performances here. All in all, I would rate The Reef a 7 out of 10. It is essentially Jaws if Jaws was realistic. It was decently acted, well directed, I enjoyed the minimalist score, and the sparing use of the shark that menaced our poor cast of characters throughout was the right decision for this particular film. It was well paced for the most part, and sits at a nice and tight 97-minute runtime, which for most films is just right. Anyway, thank you for checking out my review of The Reef, I hope you enjoyed it. Please leave a like and a comment down below with your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel for more shark movie reviews. This has been Jaws World. Take care. Bye bye.